Welcome back to Andertons TV. Look who's here today. It's only Paul Waller, a master builder from Fender. It's always a pleasure to meet the master builders, the guys that really know how to make guitars.
Well, it's great to be here.
Yeah, welcome to Andertons. Welcome to Guildford.
Thank you.
So I had the pleasure of meeting Levi and Austin earlier this year, and we talked a little bit about custom shop and master builders. And it's fun to sort of get under the skin of just like all the different creative juices that sort of flow. And you're all obviously phenomenally skilled craftsmen, but I think you all obviously have a slightly different take and a vibe on what you're doing. But you're one of the master builders that have been at Fender for the longest, right? So when did your Fender career start?
I started in 2003. I've been with Fender for 21 years now.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm still kind of in between.
So you're not one of the old boys. You're sort of you're the next rank down.
Yeah,
from that.
I would say I always kind of think of it as like Dale, myself, maybe Jason Smith as kind of the second generation custom shop.
Yeah.
And now I think we're starting to see a welcoming of a third generation.
Yeah.
So it's been really cool to work through kind of the first generation and learn from those cats.
Yeah.
And then be a part of the history of all of it for the last 20 years. And I look forward to hopefully another 20 years into retirement, and then I can be the salty old guy that's just yelling at everybody.
So what got you into guitar building? Have you spent your whole life doing this? Or?
Yeah, so, Dad was always messing around with woodworking in the garage, and I wanted to follow, and so I did some of it as a young person. And then in high school, I went and took wood shop. We had shop classes in high school. I wanted to take wood shop so I could make a guitar, and the teacher laughed at me. And he's like, yeah, a bunch of people have tried, no one's ever done it. And so it kind of started there. Music was always in the family, and I was the youngest. My brother was older. And Dad played drums, brother wanted the guitar, so I got stuck with the bass.
Right.
Which was kind of fun because I always had a gig, because there was never any bass players around. So I stayed pretty busy through high school with that. And then obviously just messing around, building guitars in the garage. Went to school at Roberto Venn in Arizona. That was a 6-month course, and then came home and basically said, no more college for me. I thought about doing some studio sound recording, but it was a pretty saturated market, especially being out in the Southern California area. And I didn't want to get lost in something and not be passionate about it. And woodworking and working with my hands has always been something that was just second nature. So I ended up at Fender after making custom kitchen cabinets for homes for a few years. I ended up at Fender in 2003.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, Pete and I had the pleasure of visiting the Fender place in Corona. So we looked around the custom shop and the regular factory and everything like that. And it is amazing to watch how guitar building now has embraced modern techniques, but still uses very traditional techniques as well. As far as, tell me about, when you approach a guitar, and, I think we were talking again a bit before camera about all the master builders are obviously building lots and lots of similar style. You're getting orders for Strats, Tellys, Jazz Masters, all that kind of stuff, basses. So it's not like you can go, I've got this idea to build a guitar that's made in a star shape. It's like you're sticking to it. But you've all still got your sort of instinctive sort of approach to building a guitar. Where does it start for you? So I'm thinking maybe less round where you've got a very specific order from a customer that's just said, I want this, and perhaps it's a little bit more free reign for you to sort of go, okay, I've got to do some 60s Strats, but that's the only brief that I've got. I can kind of go wherever I want after that. Where does it start? I mean,
it's hard to explain, but the only thing I can say is if you have a favorite like restaurant or something, and you know that you're going to go there and get the same meal that you think about in your head again and again and again. And it doesn't matter when it is, you can go to that restaurant and know that you're going to get it. That head chef is going to make that dish the same every time. And that's kind of where I'm at with it in my head is, because of the parameters of being a Fender, we have rules that we can and can't do.
Yep.
There's certain things, and by rights, we want to be traditional, but we also want to make sure that whatever we're seasoning it with, that it's still that same dish and it's consistent. For me, that means, making sure that it's every bit true to Fender without stepping outside of that box, but making it the very best version of it.
I've picked up this, which is one of yours. So there's some bits on here. People talk about your approach to the neck carve. I'm interested in that. You've obviously gone for a satin, like a worn down satin sort of finish here, but even down to wood choice, are you looking for a certain weight or grain or characteristic of a on a body or a neck to start with?
Most of the time it's weight. It's weight related. But it's also customer specific. So some might be more concerned about weight. Then I'm seeking that out. If we're eating with our eyes, then figure and all that, then obviously that takes precedent over whatever weight we might save. If something's prettier, obviously I'm going to put it on there. But yeah, I have to take myself out of it. I'm not building a guitar for me. I'm building a guitar for somebody else, and it took me a few years to really grasp that concept, to make sure that it's not what I want.
Although that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes I would imagine people have asked for you to build their guitar for them because they do want you to sort of feel like you're building it for yourself.
It is true.
So this is a very lightweight Strat. I am interested in. I'm obviously visually drawn to flame maple on the necks because I do like them, but I don't know. There's this sort of oiled finish, obviously where the lacquer has been worn off, and obviously you're obviously accelerating the process, if you like, of lacquer being worn off over 20 years, and you're doing it, in hours, but. Sometimes, I sometimes find that the flame maple necks almost consistently have this slightly different feel to them. I don't know if that's completely psychosomatic or if there is a different
No, there's a bit of
feel
texture to the flame.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, even when you sand it, because of the density of the grain, it kind of keeps printing through even after you sand it. So you can kind of feel a bit of a texture.
Yeah. I love getting into the weeds with, builders of your experience, because people will have to forgive who are watching here. I'm talking about the things that are so marginal between, one guitar and the next, but where there's just, you've picked it up and you can't put your finger on why you love something so much, but there's just something. And I don't know what it is. Like I say, I love this, I love that sense. Is it an oil as well as just sanding, or is it just almost like just trying to recreate
it's
the
stain and oil combined. I go through quite a bit, because one of the issues I've found is if you don't do a kind of an elaborate process with removing the finish, it might feel great at the factory, but once it's starting to get moisture introduced to it, whether it be from a person's hand or even the atmospheric moisture, it can have kind of a rough feeling on the back of the neck. So I actually go through some extra steps to make sure that doesn't happen. So because a true vintage worn-in neck won't do that, because it's a seasoned piece of wood. So I'm trying to emulate all that. So it's a combination of a bit of stain, a bit of oil, and a great deal of massaging.
And this might sound ridiculous, but I assume you're starting with a lacquered neck to then rub it off, or is it
sometimes? Or
are you putting almost, because you're going to rub it off, are you putting like a very light lacquer on it, as opposed to perhaps if you were trying to make a lacquered neck?
Sometimes, in fact, the results can be different if lacquer is applied to the entirety of the neck. So on a situation like this, where the order comes in and it actually specifies no finish on the back of the neck, it's actually sprayed in a manner that it doesn't actually get applied to the entire back of the neck.
So you're really just worrying about the headstock and down by the heel joint.
And then I manipulate it into, where.
I mean, that does make sense, because I just, it is a good custom shop Strat does absolutely have that feel of the like your most comfortable pair of slippers that you've just worn like, you know, every year for 20 years. And this definitely has one. I mean, I'm intrigued that I sort of overheard some of the other guys talking about a very specific neck thing that you do that I'm not familiar with, but could you go into that?
It has more to do with just rolling the edge and the frets. You know, I'm one of those people that I'm concerned about longevity, and I'm not just trying to get a guitar into someone's hands. I want them to love it and appreciate it for years to come. So I actually roll the corner of the fret a lot. Into what some people call them hot dogs, because they just have this you know, completely ball end look to them. And I do that on purpose because I feel that, especially on rosewood boards, that fret sprout is almost inevitable at some point in the guitar's life, and that will eliminate the abrasion that comes through when it does inevitably happen. Obviously, the better care you take with oiling your fingerboard and proper care and maintenance will mitigate all of that. But it just makes for an easier solve if it does indeed happen throughout its life. And it's just kind of one of the things I've always enjoyed. It just, for me, always felt better.
I think it adds to that sense of just familiarity with the neck. I've always been a rolled edge kind of fan. I don't know, I think you know, I play, like I guess a lot of guitar players do, in a very non-classical style. So there's a lot of my hand touching the edge of the fretboard all the time. And it makes a huge difference to me. But you can overdo a rolled edge as well, to the point where you just go, no, that feels, you know, and then you get the things where the string starts to slip off the fretboard. But this is basically perfect. It's exactly how you would want it to be.
I don't do much bevel. That's the difference. Because you know, the Fender, you're already missing real estate in width with the string spacing, whereas some of the other brands might be wider and they inset the strings. So that's always been kind of an issue with the Fender. And then as you get the fret wire taller and you put a bevel on it, you kind of make this pyramid shape. You're shortening the distance of width at the top of the fret. So when I dress the end of the fret, I keep it straight up and down, and then I do my roll, and that allows for the fret real estate to go all the way to the edge. So if you notice, the sides are rolled, but not the top.
It's really interesting you said it, because sometimes I think, you know, I'm trying to think where I've seen it. Music Man, I think, do a great job of finishing some of their guitars well, but they get more of a bullnose end on the edge of the fret, and I wonder if that does contribute perhaps to the string slipping off the edge of the fret. You are right, yours are kind of like, you've sort of extended the width of the fret as much as you possibly can, but still taken the sort of the edges off to make it feel comfortable to play.
Most guitars, when you look at them, there's not much attention paid to the corner of the fret, and so you'll see kind of, I call it the smashed thumb. It looks like you hit it with a hammer and just, you know, kind of fleshed out. Yeah. And so you can see the bevel on the side of the fret. There'll be like a flat spot, like a facet.
On the body here, tell me about, I mean, this feels pretty light, but is it just an alder body or an ash body or something like that? Hard to tell through the finish
I
here.
believe this is a roasted alder.
Right. The thickness of the lacquer that goes on, I'm loving this. I'll just fan the flames of the comments section here. I believe without the guitar plugged in, you can hear when a guitar is resonating versus when a guitar feels like it's subdued, you know, just like it's been constricted or somewhere. So I'm always, again, a bit of a fan of a sort of a very thin, light finish on one. But, you know, again, am I making all that up? Have I just read too much on the internet? Or are you going for a certain finish that you think gives the best resonance?
I do love Relic guitars, and a big part of it is the thin finish. Obviously, nothing on the back of the neck. That is absolutely my favorite as well. But for me, I have always felt like there's like guys like Dale have done a really good job of doing the heavy Relic, and that's kind of his realm. I've always been a less is more kind of person when it comes to the relicing. So what I want to do is add like the texture and the guitar was played and not wiped down and put in the case, so that you can kind of feel that it's not shiny anymore. Yeah. The dirtiness in the horns, that kind of stuff, to me, it still sends it as a Relic, but maybe one that was not quite as distressed as, say, a heavy Relic. So I tend to do more Relicing in terms of how I affect the finish and making it dirty.
I had a great conversation with Tom Murphy, another famous, Relicing guy, albeit for a different company, and his view with aging versus Relicing. He was like, look, aging the finish and does have an impact on its playability and how it might sound. How much you relic it is in his opinion completely aesthetic. It's just like how ripped do you want the jeans to be? It's not, would you sort of concur with that, or are you sort of thinking that actually the extent of the relicing is also contributes to how the instrument sounds and plays?
Yeah, I would say that would be a pretty true statement for me as well. The finish itself, we can manipulate whether we want it super thin or somewhere in between. I tend to lean towards the thinnest that I can achieve, and that makes for two things. I don't have to relic it that much, and somebody can get the guitar and then they can take it out and start playing it, and it'll start coming away where they decide, not where I decide. And so, like, sometimes finger wear is a problem for me, because I feel like that can be in a situation where, depending on how you play or where you're spending your time, is where you're going to wear it. So we've actually seen guitars where artists have received a Relic guitar and then played it, and they've added on top of what was originally there, So for me, it's more like, I'm going to give you the bare bones of it, and then you put your fingerprint on it.
Well, I've never asked this question before, and it's only really occurred to me as you're talking. Could you hold up the 54 there? So you can see the fingerboard relicing, and obviously what you're trying to do here is emulate what would have happened if someone was playing a lot of D chords and a lot of G chords, or soloing around here, less so up here. Would you even bother to try and do that on a rosewood board guitar, or is it just a purely aesthetic on a maple board?
You can, but my school of thought is, anytime I approach a Relic guitar, it's almost like a vintage guitar that has been completely gone through to play perfectly, because I can't sell a worn fret guitar. That would be like buying a new car that had bald tires on it. That wouldn't be safe or fun for anybody. So I kind of approach it more like the guitar was a vintage guitar that has been refretted, refurbished, fresh nut, new strings, complete setup, dialed in. And let's just leave it there. Also, it's not a vintage guitar. I mean, it looks the part, it feels the part, it plays the part, it sounds the part. But it is a different animal, and it is the aesthetic that we are selling. It is kind of almost a lifestyle.
This was another conversation. I was saying to Paul beforehand, it's like, if you gave me £5,000 and a room full of custom shop Fender guitars, I guarantee I'll come out with a better playing guitar if I can try a few of them than if you gave me £25,000 and 10 60 Strats or 50, 60 Strats to go and try. Because I think it's the vintage guitar market over the last 25 years has just been, it has been hyped out of all proportion, and people need to remember that vintage guitars are expensive because of their rarity and their investability, if that makes sense. They are just one of those products like classic cars or fine wines or whatever that have, people aren't buying expensive wine to drink it, right? They're buying it to put in their vault for 10 years and then sell it to the next guy for 3 times what they paid for it. And that's really what's driven the vintage market up. Whereas the custom shop market, the eyes is still on, it's got to be the best guitar it can be. That's the only reason that the custom shop exists, is just to make the best guitars it possibly can. So I'm not suggesting that there aren't any good vintage guitars. I'm just, and I know this is the case, I've played plenty myself. There is a huge variety of consistency of whether a vintage guitar is any good or not as an instrument, which I think on Custom Shop you don't get that variance. They're all within a good tolerance. Anyway, that's what I think. Anyway.
I agree with you, and
we would say that, wouldn't we?
We find that a lot of artists are saying, like, you know, my vintage guitar, it sounds great for recording, but it's not something that I want to take on the road. I don't want to risk losing it, damaging it, and the Custom Shop replacement will suffice for touring and sometimes even replacing the vintage guitar, which is a deep bow to us for building what we build today.
I want to play some of these, and I'm sure people here want to hear them, but I mean, this looks like a killer kind of, exactly the kind of thing that you'd think somebody in the 80s has just gone, right, what I need to do is strip this down, paint it yellow, put a humbucker at the bridge. So what have you done here, pickups wise? Because I know you were very proud of the fact that one of your humbucker designs is the first hand wound Custom Shop pickup that's been done. So tell us about what's your thoughts on pickups and what have you put in this guitar?
Yeah, so again, staying within the box, you know, it's a Fender Stratocaster. There's not too much we can change. What's acceptable is to change the bridge pickup in a Strat. That seems to be the only thing available to the Stratocaster. In the Telecaster, it would be the neck pickup. You can change that without catching too much grief. So a few years back, maybe 2018, 2019, I think 2018, I wanted to develop a humbucker that was more Fender-y and not so. I tend to like underwound pickups or more vintage sounding pickups, so I'm always kind of chasing that when I build. And I wanted a pickup that didn't exist that I thought should have or could have had they gone that direction. And so it's all slug magnets. There's no bar magnet. There's no elevator plate. So, and it's a not a switchable or tappable humbucker. It's full on all the time, and it was just voiced to be a good companion to the single coil in both the Strat and the Tele. And that's kind of where I started. I made a few coils, and then I had Josefina start winding them, so then that became kind of the first Custom Shop hand-wound humbucker that I'm aware of.
Comparing ideas with Tim Shaw, or is he
No,
not?
He's in a different place.
Okay.
At the, I'm in the Custom Shop, and he's got a separate office where he does all of his R&D.
Yeah.
And I didn't really communicate with him. I probably should have, but we're kind of in separate camps, like different worlds. So I liked Tim's,
I'm allowed to do stuff. I liked that you mentioned about not tapping the humbucker, and I would say 99.9%. Yeah, if people go, oh yeah, there's my single coil sound. It's like no. It doesn't. It really that's a single coil. That's a humbucker. You know,
I've never been a fan.
Yeah,
I've never been a fan.
I did think Tim's Shawbucker was one of the. Was it the Shawbucker? There's one that he does. Maybe double tap. Sorry, the double tap I think is one of the closest sounding to a single coil. But yeah, if you want a single coil, you just really should buy a single coil.
Yeah. And so I wanted something that would balance in both volume and in flavor to a single coil without being such a huge jump.
I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but I am so, I just want to play this guitar, It just sounds great. That's a good balance, isn't it? Because you get the characteristic of the humbucker in the sense that there's a bit of bite and it's fatter than a single coil bridge pickup, but it doesn't feel like you've put your accelerator on the floor and just gone from like 20 to 80 in one go. It's a Strat. It's a perfectly great Strat. Nice. my excessive reverb off. Tell me about these troposphere pickups. Great name, love Fender names.
Yeah, so everything else, all the chili pepper names were taken, and the food names. So I wanted to stay away from that. And being that, it was the stratocaster and the different layers, I thought I was being clever, but it just turned out to cause more confusion than anything. But
it's a layer of the atmosphere.
It's underneath the stratosphere, and it was an underwound pickup, so I thought I was being really super clever.
You are being clever.
But it just turns out I'm an idiot. So it's an underwound vintage coil, but it's the Alnico 5 that we know and love. And then it's mixed with, usually the neck pickup has enamel, and then the middle pickup is going to be form bar, which is the coating that's on the copper wire inside the pickup, and it's really nerdy, and no one needs to really understand that.
You said, go on, sorry, but yeah.
It does add for it being a nice combination with the humbucker, and that's the reason why I put them in there.
I do think, I'm a huge believer in not trying to be too scientific about guitar building and accept that this wonderful combination of things is coming together to make a noise. And I'm not a big fan of the sort of YouTube videos that try to prove through science that things can make a difference or not make a difference. I think there's more of a vibe there. But, and I will caveat that with a but, I do think that there is science behind pickups and understanding magnets and alloys for magnets and the type of copper that you're going to wind it with is more important than a vibe of it, whether it's hand wired or not hand wired. So I am a believer in in people really understanding how to make a great pickup. But so you've gone, and I'm interested with this low wind thing, because what obviously people would normally associate the single coil with being a low output pickup anyway. So
yep.
You've gone extra low output?
No, it's not much lower, but the trend had been just put so much copper on the coil till the cover doesn't fit anymore. And it had been that way for so long, but I guess I liked it too. Mm-hmm. I guess we all had a cup of it, and it was delicious, but I felt it was missing because it just kept pushing everything so driven. And every time I would spec out an old vintage guitar, there was this woodsy tone that I would hear that just didn't exist in all that super hot stuff. And so I'm trying to capture that. I'm trying to capture as much of that as I can, which is why they're not underwound so much that they lose any presence.
Yeah.
It's just enough to make it feel like I'm getting that vintage woodsy sound.
Because it's not lacking bass, is it? It's got a clarity to it. Sometimes I wonder, are you just letting the amp breathe more and the circuit breathe more and everything because you're not piling too much signal down it? I don't know. I just say it how I hear it. It does feel like I probably want to turn my amp up a little bit with these, so it does feel like
that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's nothing. I enjoy the acoustic quality. Again, I almost feel, and I know obviously wood doesn't make a difference and blah, 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 so you say, I feel like if you lower wind any pickup on a guitar, it's easier to hear the natural acoustic tone of the instrument.
Yeah, there's a threshold to both, I think, both high and low.
Interesting. And you're doing these as a set, are you? So you don't have to just buy it on a guitar?
Correct, yeah. So you can buy the Tropo set or Troposphere set, and you can run, there's a separate middle pickup, but you can swap the neck and bridge.
Okay.
Depending on, and I always tell people if you're more living in the neck position, then use the enamel pickup in the neck position.
Oh wow!
I think
and
you'll
so
enjoy
you're just doing
it
them as
more.
3 singles, or are you doing it as an 8? Can you do this set or?
Not yet, but
Not yet,
maybe
but
coming
maybe.
soon.
Interesting.
Stay tuned for more. But the other thing
I was gonna
about the
say-
underwound that is, to me, when you roll off a volume knob, you lose a bit of something in the guitar, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel the same way about underwound pickups. Like, if it causes you to turn your amp up more, I feel like you're opening it up and allowing more of what the circuit is actually trying to do without hindering it. And so I'm always a big fan of turning things up to really hear what's going on.
Well, that's the. I do enjoy listening to Joe Bonamassa talk about guitar tone. I think he does understand, particularly vintage stuff like no one else does. And he's like, that's the sound. You wanna open the amp up and then just find the sweet spot on the volume here, because it does allow the amp to bloom in a certain way that it doesn't do if you go maximum volume here and then turn the amp down. So I think there's there's a lot of finesse that I think over the years we've just forgotten, because everyone's just 10, maximum gain, turn the master volume down.
Yeah.
But that's a sound as well. But I
Sure
think there's plenty of stuff in there to go find if you want to. Yeah, the colour will inevitably appeal to some people and not to others, but the guitar itself is just fantastic. So we're going to talk about some of the guitars that are here. Some of them you've built, some I think your colleagues have built. We should absolutely talk about the 70th anniversary, because that's a milestone in anybody's life. This feels like it has a sort of a sibling. So what's the story behind these two? Is there a connection, or is it just a coincidence that they're the same color?
So upon my visit, we discussed maybe building a couple guitars for you, and I suggested we play around with this new humbucker, and so you threw me a bone and let me build a couple of guitars, a Strat and a Tele, and of course the 72 Tele Custom was always one of my favorite guitars. So this is the deluxe version with a sawed-off Tele bridge and 2 of the humbuckers that Josefina hand wound.
So the bridge, essentially, apart from the plate that the single coil would be in, is essentially a regular Tele bridge.
Yeah, the deluxe would have had the either the Strat hardtail or the fancy one had a tremolo on it. So I'm not a fan of the tremolo myself on Telecasters. It seems counterintuitive to.
They're so zingy. I mean, it's like, I just want to play this acoustically. Neck feels very, very similar carve. Again, it's got that beautiful tactile finish to it. Got the bigger headstock and some slightly different tuners now. So it's got that more 70s kind of vibe. Same kind of finish. 3-bolt neck design. Go on, is this controversial, or does everyone make much too much of a fuss about this?
It can be, but it's when you get into 72, you don't really have an option. So we have done 4-bolt versions. That is orderable, at least master built, to do a 4-bolt version of the 72 Tele or the deluxe, either the custom or the deluxe.
Yeah, I don't know that I've had enough. I kind of think there's more important. I think if the pocket is cut right, I don't really know what.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Is there really a big problem with a 3-bolt?
I've never encountered any. I've never had a service return on one. But in terms of percentages of 3 bolts versus 4 bolts, it's a very small number.
I mean, I certainly remember that I started selling guitars at the sort of end of the 80s, and there was I just remember this bizarre people just coming in and sort of giving you back their 70s guitar and just going, I don't even care what I'll get on part exchange for this, I just want the 80s one. And I think that the 3-bolt neck design almost got. There were a lot of other things that weren't good about Fender guitars in the 70s that have created this, image of a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not. enormously sure that the 3-bolt neck design was a big part of the problem. I think just the general quality of the guitars was a bigger problem.
I think you're right about that.
But it's become sort of synonymous with something not good about Fender.
It's a standout feature that is kind of inescapable.
The pots feel incredibly friction-free on here. What are you using?
So I actually upgraded the pots to 500K because we are using a humbucker, and they are the low friction 500Ks, and I like the way that works.
Yes,
it almost feels like a real vintage pot.
Right. Again, everything is different tools for different jobs, right? But the low wound, the way that's distorting and the way it's kind of still retaining sort of note clarity and a sense that actually what it really wants you to do is, if you want the grunt, you've got to play harder and just dig in.
Yeah, which is how a Fender works.
Yeah.
The attack on a Fender will give you what I think makes the single coil player so much better is there's a feel to it.
Shots fired.
Not that obviously I'm not against humbuckers, but if you know how to play a single coil pickup, and even Jeff Beck is noted as saying you can't lie with a single coil, which is a beautiful statement because of the range you have with the single coil. I wanted to have that same kind of I can still hear you with the humbucker. That's why I did it.
I think I would 100% say, for me, overdrive is that comfort blanket. Overdrive is what enables you to sort of hide behind perhaps a slightly sloppier technique or whatever, because it's covering up elements. We did a Robin Ford clinic here a couple of weeks back, and I was watching him play, and about 60-70% of all of his lead guitar solo playing is no overdrive, completely clean. And I was talking to him afterwards, and I just went, how do you even do that? You know, it's like, it's phenomenal. And it's so unusual because you don't hear many guitar players playing essentially lead lines with no overdrive at all. And he was like, you know, very gracious and said, thank you very much, you know. And he said, but I do remember, he said, I remember a point in my professional journey where I was about to take a solo and I got my foot over the overdrive pedal, and he just went, I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to go, I'm going naked, you know, I'm just going like, and it became it became his, like a thing of his that I think separates him from most other guitar players. But yeah, it is really single coil, you know, you're a big Telecaster user like that, very clean, dumble, like, you know, it's like full exposed, you know, naked running down the street, here it is, but the... Again, it's like you say, it's not trying to be a Les Paul beast. It's a very
that already exists,
sophisticated. These necks are great, man.
Thank you.
It's like if you pick up a guitar and it makes you want to play it, it's like 99% there already, isn't it? Still sounds telly-ish though, I think. Still got a telly vibe to it, that twang.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's coming from the bridge. You know, all that metal with the brass. It kind of gives you the bark.
This is so much fun.
So again, inside the box. This is still inside the box, but
and while we're talking about Telecasters, I know you're a very modest person, but tell me about famous people that have asked you to build Telecasters for them, or any guitars for that matter. Come on.
There's been a few.
I know. They don't know though. Tell them.
I guess most notably would be Keith.
Keith.
Keith. I built a few guitars for Keith Richards.
Isn't one of those urban myths or, you know, custom shop history stories, wasn't he one of, like, the guy that just went, I can't play a guitar that doesn't look beaten up?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story, because there's a lot of people that take credit for developing the first Relic. And depending on who you talk to, you'll get a different story. But a lot of it came from, I can't play a brand new shiny guitar on stage. It's not who we are.
It would be, can you imagine? If you, I mean, although bearing in mind, of course, this is going back to when Keith probably was, this is 30 odd years ago, isn't it? That the first sort of Relics and stuff started to come out. But yeah, so that sense, and I think he opened the door, I think, for lots of artists to go, yeah, you know, I feel like that too. It's like, I'm synonymous with this road-worn, whatever it is. And it's not just the visual. I mean, it's you know, they're worried about breaking something that's irreplaceable or it being stolen or just, you know, a sense that maybe the neck and the frets is just feeling like, you know, this has probably only got one more tour left in it. It's time to just put it to bed and have a replica of it. But they want to feel like they're playing their number one, and they want the audience to feel like they're watching him playing his number one.
Yeah.
So Relic makes a lot of sense.
One of the magical things about that band is the guitars they're playing are the guitars they use to record those tunes, which to me is part of the magic of seeing them live. I mean, despite the fact that they've been doing it for as long as they have, they're still using the same stuff. And it's a testament. Chords. It's a testament to the brand that I work for. That, yeah, go ahead, put them through the paces, take them on world tours after world tour after world tour, and they're still gonna be out there performing, and then record with them and have all that expectation.
Will you just dodge the question modestly if I ask you who else you've built for?
I mean, I can give you a list of names, but I mean, would that make me a better person? I don't know. I have made guitars for a lot of famous people, and it's kind of the draw to custom shop and Masterbuilt in general is, I would say it's not just me, it's everybody in the shop. And we make this stuff for the people that play it every day, and it's important to us. And they're really good customers of ours, and we share that with all of your customers as well, and you. And so that's probably the biggest factor for working in the custom shop is we're making that same dinner for you that we've made for Mr. Richards, and that's something that I would say that good luck finding that somewhere else.
Oh man, and you know, it's really weird because I absolutely know that you are not told by the Fender sort of senior management not to disclose who you're building with, but all the guitar builders are terribly modest and terribly sort of like I don't want to like brag, oh yeah, I just built Eric Clapton. I mean, I know probably Todd is most famous for making the Clapton Strats, but sort of outside of that, you're all sort of, you know, don't really, you know, want to talk about it.
Yeah, because a lot of us we just don't like bragging about it. Because we kind of make fun of each other. Like there's the thing in the shop, if someone starts dropping names, they'll say, go get a broom and sweep up all those names you just dropped. And so...
Good for you. Good for you.
And it's to keep everybody humble, because what the reality is we're not famous. We just happen to be lucky enough to be building these
You're quite famous. I think the master builders are the new rock stars of the sort of music industry. You know,
I do love what I do, and I could probably write a book on some of the adventures that I've had through the years, but it just keeps me wanting more and going back and doing more. And a big part of it is, you know, I've lost count of how many Strats I made. I've lost count of how many Tellys I made. Yeah. But it doesn't bother me because I still want to go in every day and do it. And I just love it so much.
Oh, that's good. Well, look, I know this is not one that you've built. In fact, I'm not even sure. I don't even think this is a master built one. But I mean, this is just like...
It is a fantastic guitar.
I picked this because it's, I mean, obviously it's unbelievable. It's a statement guitar, right? So you know, nobody's going home from this gig and not talking about the guitar that the guitar player was using. But it's not. It's had no wear on the back of the neck, and it is an interesting one. I think it's a obviously a personal decision for the player to choose. It's a D-shaped profile, so it's got a slightly different vibe to it. But it doesn't. I'm not flying around the neck with the same degree of ease that I am on the Relic one. So I don't know how much I would have to play this. I often see a comment on, because it's fair to say, look, the whole Relic thing polarizes the market and all the customers, and I suspect the majority don't really appreciate Relic. I think the minority appreciates the Relic, which is fine. But people will often say, look, I want to buy a guitar like this, and then I want to put all my own marks on it and wears and stuff like that. And I sort of, and perhaps you can give a more informed comment on this, but I play guitar maybe, I don't know, I own a few guitars and I try and play for a few hours every week, but I'm not, I think I'm a pretty normal representation of how much guitar gets played, right? I'm not Rory Gallagher playing, 7 gigs a week and blah, blah, blah. And I don't own a single guitar, even guitars that I've owned for like 30 years, that don't look like this on the back of the neck. So I'm like, this whole thing of like, well, I just want to put my own, wear and tear on it. It's like,
take you a while.
I don't play it enough.
Yeah.
So if I want the guitar that feels like I've played it for a zillion hours, I have to buy it already like that. And so, but how much have you got to play a guitar like this to make it become like that?
It really depends, because people have different acidity in their skin.
Yeah.
So somebody like me who's gross can actually wear it out quicker than most normal
Maybe that's
people.
what it is, or like baby
maybe you're just not
like
gross
that.
like me. And it's funny because a lot of the guitars that we know and love as being these monsters that have no paint on them probably just has to do with the pH balance in someone's skin.
Is there an alcohol content?
I cannot confirm or deny that alcohol causes a change in someone's skin, but I will say that it would be a lot of it would be whatever you put in your mouth.
Well, look,
whether it be food or drink.
So I mean, this is cool. It still sounds absolutely great. It's very cool. It's very, very cool. It's got a cool sound, but it's an iconic look, isn't it? That with the bigger headstock.
Yeah, sure.
What else have we got here? I do like. I think this is another limited one. But instantly, as soon as I pick that up, I know it's got no flame in it. In fact, that is really interesting now because there absolutely, categorically is a tactile difference between one with no flame in it and flame in it.
So I've had Masterbuilt orders myself that were NOS guitars with no finish on the back of the neck for somebody that is orderable.
Yeah.
At least on the Masterbuilt level. I don't know if I'll do it team built, but I have had that order before numerous times. Because it feels so good.
What is that difference? It's just, I mean, there's absolutely nothing I could say or write to explain the minuscule difference in the nerve endings in my hand going to my brain between this guitar and this guitar.
It's almost playable versus unplayable.
It's just really weird. But it just, I don't know. I think I can. Is there a skunk? There must be a skunk stripe. Is there no skunk stripe in that one?
No.
Okay, I mean, that might be some of it. I think I might, yeah,
Not
okay.
on this one.
I wonder if I wonder if it's all just in my head and there is no difference, but it does. See, that's interesting, because this is obviously a different bridge, but you can 100% hear between the Telecaster that you made and this with a more conventional TV Jones humbucker in it.
Yeah.
This is more the guitar you want if you're just not looking for the subtlety. You just want to play. I mean, maybe it'll do subtle. But this doesn't make me want to play subtly. This makes me just want to.
It's kind of on or off.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It serves a purpose.
100%. There are some songs where there's no, you just pedal to the metal for the whole song. It's like, it's another tool for a different gig, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's another statement guitar. I do love the natural back with the binding and the blue sparkle. That's very, very cool. So this is another one. Again, I've just picked guitars out of the showroom here, not necessarily ones that Paul's made. It's got a Keith vibe to it, even though I know that's not his, his go-to pickup. I like that a lot. I think I'm going to have to swap guitars with you here. I think we should talk about the 70th. Thank you very much. It's just, Telecaster and Stratocaster, the debate as to which is the best and what's your favourite and everything will rage on forever. Bizarrely, I think that when I was growing up and learning to play guitar, definitely the Stratocaster was the dominant instrument. Clapton, Knopfler, all those guys. And the Telecaster, I kind of feel like, apart from Keith, was almost confined to the country guys, really. And I'm talking about 80s kind of stuff.
Yep.
I can't, but it feels to me like the last 20 years or so, that pendulum has swung right back in favour of the Telecaster as the sort of the more popular. But visually, I mean, it's like the Mona Lisa of the guitar world, isn't it? What else could you do to make that any prettier?
And I think that's why people get so angry when you get too far outside of the boundaries with the Strat. And I get it. And, it's funny now that I've been working for this company so long, when someone tries to emulate the peg head or a certain shape, I immediately spot it. It's almost burned into my brain to where I can have a tracing pattern in my brain to know where it's wrong. And I think that's true for a lot of people, that they just know what it looks like and expect a certain thing from a Stratocaster.
How much of, I remember trying to read some books about Leo Fender, and I don't think he himself put a lot of pen to paper about that earlier time. There was some interesting stuff, I think, by George Fullerton had written some stuff about Leo and things. But so I think there's a lot of mystique around what was driving choices that he was making on the guitar. But in your opinion, what drove the fundamental Strat designs from the Telecaster which had come before it?
I would say, and I tell this story a lot when I give tours of the factory, is you're right, Leo didn't play much, if at all, but he had a really good ear and he was really into electronics. And he was the original artist relations guy, because he would bring in artists and say, what's wrong with the guitar so I can fix it?
Right.
And somebody humble enough to do that, to say, not only say, come in and I'll give you a guitar, but tell me what I've done wrong. That's kind of hard to do and face, right? So it's basically developed from tele players saying, my arm hurts, my rib hurts, and let's go from there. And so the third pickup is added, and then a wiggle stick, and they change the shape to make this, and that's why we see a lot of this contour body, patent pens kind of thing, because that whole shape and feel was developed over comfort from artists that were playing the Telecasters. And so you're right, to me the Stratocaster is probably the most prominent and beautiful electric guitar.
it's hard to think of any other things where form and function have been so beautifully combined. You know, you look at most things that are incredibly convenient and ergonomic and tactile versus things that are beautiful and wonderful to look at. I'm thinking of cars, you know, it's just like,
yeah.
And yet the Strat just did both, didn't it? It just went, yeah, I've nailed all of the ergonomic frustrations around the Telecaster and made something even more beautiful at the same time.
That's right.
It's amazing. You know, all at a time when, again, you know, Leo would have been in a relatively small, you know, circle of influence. He just probably wouldn't have known much of what was going on in the music world outside of California, you know, outside of North America.
Well, he did surround himself with very talented people. That was one of the other reasons why he was very successful.
It's got a different vibe to it. It's brighter, zingier. Have you gone with the frets that would have been on a 54, or is this a slightly jumboer, terrible word, but bigger fret?
I believe this is the team built 70th anniversary guitar.
Right.
Sometimes, you know, to stay away from maybe other collectibles that we've done in the past, we still want to celebrate the anniversary, but we don't want to step on a collectible item. Sometimes the specs will be changed. I'm unclear on this one, but it looks perhaps.
Let me just get one I made earlier in true Blue Peter style. Let's have a little look, because I happen to have a Masterbuilt 54 from 2004, where your esteemed colleague Yuri Shishkov made this one.
Yeah.
And let's have a little look. Now, I'm led to believe that this is pretty much as accurate as it can be to a 54.
Yeah. Which would have been the 7 1/4 radius.
Oh, so what have we got on here? We got 9 1/2 on here.
I'm not sure what the spec was on that one. It looks a little flatter to me, but I could just be.
This is where we go down the rabbit hole of fretboard radius and realise that actually we all think it makes a huge difference, and then you can't tell which is which when you're actually playing them.
Right.
Let's put this down here. Now, again, I'm telling you, I sort of tragically bought this guitar in like a closet classic finish, i.e. very, very little wear and tear. Never ever used it. Decided in my head that the reason I didn't use it was because it wasn't reliced, and then asked one of the techs that we have here to relic it, and I probably destroyed its value, but I do at least use it a bit more now. And then I discovered that actually probably the reason I didn't use it very much was that actually 54 is probably not my go-to Strat style. And we talked about the tonality of a 54. So in fact, let's talk about the differences that have evolved over the years. So firstly, I wouldn't describe this as a baseball neck, but it's a little thicker than a 60s neck, isn't it?
Yeah, as you know, the truss rod and the long maple neck was a concern that, you know, it could be a problem if they got too thin with the neck. Plus, a lot of the other brands that were producing guitars at the time had super thick necks on them, and that was just the industry standard and what people were used to.
Oh, okay.
And so to get too far from that would just be radical and unsellable, I would imagine. So
little did we know that that's actually what we wanted.
Yeah, but and it all comes back to rock and roll, right? I mean, for me, the biggest part of all of it was the P bass. Because before that, it was an upright bass, and it's kind of hard to have punk rock and roll music without some sort of electric bass. And so I feel like that was the final piece to the puzzle, and then things could start accelerating into the madness that is everything that we love. Yeah, so everything would have been, you know, these like 53, 54 was a very similar neck shape, and the factory only made one neck shape for the entirety of the year, and then they would do a refresh each year. And if you pay attention to the specs, they actually get thinner and thinner and thinner until we arrive at kind of this slim C that we like in like 59 and 60.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the most popular shape.
We were talking about the fretboard radius of being historically 7 1/4 inch, and then what year would that have gone to the sort of 9 1/2? Was that?
It wouldn't have been until much later, until the 80s.
So, and again, I suppose if you're there is a mixed school of thought here, but I think the general consensus now if you've got that very heavy radius in there and the guitar is badly set up, it's going to choke when you're bending your strings up here. But if it's well set up, largely that issue is negated. I mean, I think if you're doing crazy, you know, two-tone bends or whatever like that, maybe you'll still get an issue. But interestingly, on the custom shop here, the reason we had to have just a split-second break in recording here is we just wanted to confirm that we were right, that actually this has got a compound radius fretboard. So it's going from 7 1/4 down here to 9 1/2 up here, which was probably why it was throwing me going, I'm not sure which one it is. But tell us that even that isn't, even that there are small traces of sort of evidence that either wittingly or unwittingly that was happening even back in the day.
Yeah,
just this idea of fretboards changing radius.
They were dressed by hand, obviously, in the factory in the 50s, and so I've even seen them more than 7 1/4. There's some famous guitars that I've notably taken apart and realized they're actually more like 7, not 7 1/4, or maybe 6 3/4. And so that just kind of goes to show you that there was some drift in the spec, whereas now we're very, very strict on how things are. So, and you know, it makes sense that perhaps in a refret something was done to make it a compound on accident, whether it was on purpose or not. And if you're going to do something like that, that's the best way to make a mistake. So, and it's easy to do. It's easy to sand too much in the middle of the neck than on the end.
So yeah, if you've not played a 54, again, it's a fairly familiar neck. It's a little on the chunkier side. It's a you know, bright sounding guitar. Probably the biggest difference between the modern Strats and these vintage ones is what's happening with the electronics. So they're very bright pickups on a 54. Yeah. What do you think was driving that?
Just that, you know, they're kind of, with the first year of the Strat, they're kind of throwing baloney, and they realized quickly that maybe this can get updated. And so, you know, with the magnet choice, and then also it's a 3-way switch, or was a 3-way switch. And then as players started figuring out that they could get in between positions, it made sense to kind of voice the pickup to the amps that were being made. And that was one of the other things that I think it's lost a lot of people is these guitars were specifically voiced to a certain amp circuit, and it was usually the newest amp of that era.
Oh, interesting.
And because Leo was so good with the electronics, he had a really good ear to voice the amps with the guitar. And I think that's a part of a conversation, maybe a much bigger conversation of the brand that I work for that it's lost on, is the amp is a big part of the circuit that most people don't talk about. We'll go out and buy 10, 20 of these things, but then put them all through the same amp and expect a different result.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of guitar amplifiers. And I'm glad you say that, because for me, I almost want to talk about amps like instruments, you know, because nobody hears me playing an electric guitar like that. Everybody hears that.
Yeah.
And if I could plug all of these guitars into that amplifier, and I would get, you know, like a 10%, 20% different tone as I went across these. But if I plugged into these 7 or 8 different amplifiers, I would get like a 50 to 100% difference in tone. And yet, you're right, people go, you know, I think it's a great shout. So you're saying that almost the characteristic of this guitar is more...
It's malleable.
But driven through what amps and electronics would have been being manufactured back in the 50s as well, which I suppose would have been, what, relatively low-powered tweed circuit kind of tube.
Yeah, even a tweed twin, that thing through a tweed twin might change your mind.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And then maybe put it in through a high power, 100-watt twin. And I bet you'll really like it.
Yeah, because I was saying, it's the one of the things that I don't think I've ever gelled with on my guitar is the brightness and thinness of the pickups. But as you say, maybe I'm just playing through the wrong amplifier or playing the wrong style.
Sometimes circuits open up you know, it's like salt opening up flavors in food.
Let's give people some tones. It's that one. So I'm okay here. It is lower power and cleaner, and I think maybe lacks a little bass end compared to the 60s style pickups, but it's not, it's not far away. Of course, as you were saying, this didn't exist, did it? Position 2 and 4.
No.
For quite a long time as well. Again, till the 80s, I don't think Fender was speccing guitars with 5-way switches, which again feels like people in the 60s worked out that you could wedge the switch. So how does it take 25 years before you go, oh, I know, I'll make a 5-way switch? It's so clean.
It was not a desired sound from what I understand in stories that I've heard. Leo did not like the in-between sound.
So would the middle pickup have even bothered to be reverse wound then in the early days?
No, in fact, all coils were the same.
So they were all the same coil. Yeah. So
only, just like the switch and updating things, we start now, because we're putting them together now, we throw the reverse wound, reverse polarity in there.
So we would have literally got this pickup. I almost feel like you just want to play Peggy Sue by Buddy Holly, because that's almost the sound, isn't it? And then this back one.
And then that explains the reason, why maybe they added the second tone knob, but then I come to realize they didn't have it for the bridge. Yeah. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense.
It is an odd, maybe it's, again, for all of its beauty, straight out the gates, it did take maybe another 5 to 10 years after this before you really went, oh yeah, we've nailed that now.
My only takeaway from it, and I don't know this to be true, but I think the Telecaster was their biggest, most popular model. Yeah. And I think they were just trying to emulate that in the Strat, so there was some familiarity to the Strat being this brand new model.
Yeah.
We look at it through a different lens because we've only known the Strat as being the coolest and most beautiful guitar, but when it was brand new, it was actually not wanted. And that seems weird.
What's wrong with you in the 60s? Like, yeah, we don't like burst Les Pauls and the Strat. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that either. It's like, wow.
How did that happen?
I know. It's like, come on. But I guess, so I've put the Dane overdrive pedal on there. I think with a low gain sound where you let it be a bit more open, actually that brightness is okay. And again, you don't have to play. You can play a little softer and get a nice tone. It still sounds cool, man.
It does, and Mike Lewis was always noted as saying, it's a thing, and everything is a thing, and that's a thing.
Everything is a thing, and that's a thing.
It is absolutely
it's kind of true, isn't it? And it's fine to have more than one guitar. So you can have a thing for a thing, and then another thing for another thing.
I like it when people buy more guitars and I'm sure you like it too.
Well, and, the entire guitar industry is built on the fact that, we all want to own. What's the magic formula for how many guitars you need to own? It's how many you've already got plus one.
That's right.
That's the formula. It's a super guitar. Again, it reminds me of early rock and roll bands, and they were some great bands. So what's wrong with that?
That's right.
And again, so have you personally master built some 70th anniversary stuff?
I have some in the queue that are coming up, and I will be doing them shortly. And there's not very many because they are limited.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't think with the master built 70th stuff, I'm not. I think I don't think dealers have been able to specify which master builder, so it's almost like you're going to get what you're going to get.
I think it's a lottery.
Yeah, but I quite like that. I quite like the sort of idea that, you know, and because you're all going to be within a couple of % tolerance of building this to the same design, but yours are going to have your quirk to it, and Dale's will have his, and etc. etc. So I mean, I think that's pretty cool. Either way, man, I'm never. It's still my absolute favorite quirk of the whole guitar industry is how that golden era of the 1950s and the early 60s got everything so right.
Yeah.
You know, the all the brands, Fender, Gibson, Rickenbacker, Gretsch, the amp builders, Marshall, Vox, Fender again. You know, it's just like, they basically just went, I've done it.
Yeah.
It's like, now don't fuck it up. Here you go, have it.
What a great time to have it all happen too, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe that added to it, because there was so much there to pick from.
I think the only thing I regret is that I wish people had known at the time how unbelievably important what they were doing was going to be to, you know, future generations, and I wish it had been documented more, because I think that's where everybody's trying to second guess, why did Leo do this and why did Ted do this and all this kind of stuff, and then all the myth comes out and you just go, I wish like could have just sat him down before he died and just gone, so what, why? You know, and it's again, or maybe it's more fun that nobody knows, because then they make up the most ridiculous stories.
Being that I do work in the factory, and I've worked with some of the people that actually worked with Leo, I heard some of the stories. So, and I've heard some of the stories that aren't true, and I've read stuff on the internet, and then I've heard it from people that actually worked in the factory. So to have all that stuff, it's almost like working in the CIA. Having all this deep intel.
Oh yeah. So I can't
maybe
tell
we'll
you.
go
I
to
have
dinner
to kill
and
you.
you can ask me all the questions.
No, I will. I genuinely, it's a joy to work, you know, in the guitar industry when you're such a fan of guitars. You know, it doesn't really feel like a job most of the time. But look, Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Andertons. I could talk for days. And actually, it's lovely to finally meet you, because again, I really did want Ben and the guitar sort of purchasing team to have stronger relationship with the master builders, because I think every conversation we learn something, and it pulls another interesting thing out, and I think we're stocking some of the coolest guitars we've ever stocked as a result of that greater working relationship. But yeah, thanks for coming in. Again, thank you guys for watching. I'd love to, you know, for you guys to come down to the Guitar Gallery at Andertons and try some of these for yourself. It's a wonderful time to be a guitar player. So many good things. But anyway, yeah, thanks, man. And thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.